We are also, though, following breaking news out of Berlin at this hour, where German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has just lost a confidence vote, a vote, of course, that he called for. And that move now paves the way for elections in February. We have live pictures for you of the Bundestag in Berlin. President Frank-Walter Steinmeier can now move, of course, to dissolve the legislature and then formally declare the already agreed-upon election date of February 23rd. All of this coming after Germany's governing coalition collapsed last month. CNN's Sebastian Schukla is tracking the story. Joining us now live with the developments from Berlin. So not a totally unexpected outcome, but just walk us through what happens now, if you would.
Yeah, Erica, I'm still in the belly of the Bundestag here, actually, and the room just behind me is where the vote recently took its conclusion. What I have for you here is the outcome of the votes, which is Scholz lost this vote of confidence in himself. Right? The semantics around it are important, by 394 votes against him to 207 in favour of him. So that's a sizable number who have said that, look, this country needs to adopt a new chancellor and needs to embark on trying to form a new coalition government. As you said, the process around this now is that Scholz will head to the president's residence, where he will then go and ask to formally dissolve Parliament. But the way that this whole process, including the build-up to getting to this day, the vote of confidence, has been very regimented and controlled by the parties have already informally agreed when that election is going to be, and it will be on the 23rd of February. Technically, the president has 21 days to decide on the day, but it is almost a foregone conclusion. And Erica, the foregone conclusion is also being echoed by what was said in that chamber earlier today. I want you to take a listen to what Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor, had to say when he was on his feet in there earlier.
Democracy requires parties to compete against each other with different proposals, as we will do in the upcoming campaign. But democracy also requires all those who believe in it to be prepared to work together for the good of the country after an election, to build bridges, to forge compromises. This is not possible without moral maturity, without decency and seriousness. It is only possible with a sense of responsibility for our entire country, for all our citizens.
And so you can hear there that the Chancellor was almost already resigned to the fact he knew he was going to lose this vote and that Germany would move forward with elections. You could hear in there too that he was setting up the campaigning that is about to take place, that will start in earnest now. He was alluding in there to the polls which show that the CDU, the Conservative Party here in Germany, are way ahead, and that his party, the SPD, the Social Democrats, are lagging in third, sometimes potentially even falling far back as fourth, and that has left open the door to what will be a seismic change in German politics, which would be that the AfD, the far-right populist party here, could come in second place, and though they will view themselves as potential kingmakers, that will create a very difficult dynamic when it comes to forming a coalition government here, because that is usually how Germany's governments are formed. And so we will wait to see now, but it is clear, pretty much, Erica, that Germany will have a more conservative chancellor and government come February.
Certainly, Sebastian Schukla with the latest for us. Appreciate it. Thank you. Also with me to discuss, the Chief Europe Correspondent for Politico, for joining us from Berlin, Matthew Carnage-Schnee. Good to have you with us, Matthew. So as we look at where things stand, if we could just pick up, actually, where my colleague Sebastian just left off, looking at what potentially could be the makeup there. As we look at some of that polling, CDU obviously in the lead there, right, with almost a third of the vote as we look at some of this polling, but the fact that the AfD, this far-right party, is in second place, ahead of the SPD, which in some cases is even in fourth place, what does that tell you about where the country itself is headed?
Well, it tells us that the German population is really unhappy with the political establishment, and it's a story that we've seen really all across Europe in recent years, and in the United States and other parts of the democratic world. In Germany, because of its history, this development is particularly alarming to many people, which is why the establishment parties here have ruled out working with the AfD in a coalition, as we just heard. For now, all of the big parties, the CDU and the SPD, have said that they will under no circumstance collaborate with the AfD. But what that means is it really narrows the coalition options after the election, because as you can see from that polling, the AfD is getting almost 20% of the vote.
Which is really something to see a number that large. The economy, understandably, is also going to play a central role in this election come February.
Absolutely. Germany has been experiencing really high inflation in recent years in the wake of the pandemic, similar to what we've seen in the United States. But beyond that, the German economy has been stagnating for 5 years. The German economy has only grown 0.1% since 2019. That compares to 12% real growth in the United States over that period. And if you look at what just happened to the Democrats, you can see that the economic issues in Germany are going to loom large in this election. Every week, there's another announcement of mass layoffs at one of the big, sort of German car makers or foreign companies. Ford announced recently it's going to lay off thousands of workers, as has VW and a number of others. So people are really feeling the economic pain, and when that happens, obviously they blame the incumbent. So the Olaf Scholz and his Social Democrats really have a tough road to hoe here in the coming weeks.
Yeah, as you note, it is a well-known story at this point in a number of countries around the globe. When we look at, too, what is coming down the pike, this threat of tariffs from President-elect Donald Trump, that is also weighing, obviously, on a number of economies. How much is that figuring into the discussion in Germany?
I think for now, it's a little bit in the background. It's more of an elite discussion that people here tend to be very afraid of Donald Trump and what he might do. The Germans had a somewhat unhappy experience with him the last time he was president, because he demanded that they pay more for defense, for example. And I think that's a theme that we're going to see once again, and Trump has already signaled that he's going to demand, in particular of the Germans, that they do more on that front. People are now discussing 3% of GDP instead of 2% for defense, and the Germans have had difficulty even getting to the 2% mark. So this is going to make life, I think, very difficult for this next government, because they're going to have to weigh the kind of social spending that many Germans have become to rely on and expect with the security needs that the country has. And at the same time, they have a very rigid debt brake in Germany, which is the reason that this last government collapsed, in fact, because the three parties in that coalition couldn't agree on spending. So this is going to be a very difficult period for Germany in the years ahead, particularly because the economy doesn't look like it's going to recover anytime soon. And there are a lot of spending priorities that they have to address here.
There's also the broader issue, right, as to how this fits into the overall puzzle of Europe. When we were talking about, of course, Europe's largest economy, normally incredibly stable, to be at this point, we see what's happening in France as well. Moving into 2025, it's not just Germany, perhaps, that is looking at a period of instability and concern.
That's absolutely right. And Germany, of course, is known as the economic motor of Europe. And at the moment, it really is sputtering. And that has an effect on all of the neighboring countries, because the big German companies here that we think of, the industrial companies, machinery makers, chemical makers, and so forth, they have a really strong network of operations in Central and Eastern Europe as well. And those economies are also going to face pressures because of the German weakness. So this is going to have sort of political ripples, I think, across Europe if the Germans can't manage to turn this around, and especially with the crisis, really, the political crisis in France at the moment. It doesn't really bode well for the kind of political stability that Germans hold so dear. And with the far right resurgent here, that's another big concern. And we haven't mentioned the issue of migration, which is also quite potent here, as it is in other parts of Europe. And the government so far, the last government, has really struggled to get its arms around that issue as well.
Yes. Absolutely, a lot there. Matthew, really appreciate you joining us with your perspective and your expertise. Thank you.